All right, Matthew Boyd is with us today to talk about the Delta variant of the COVID-19 virus. Could you tell us about your background with respect to microbiology so that you're able to tell us about the situation with the Delta variant?
My background in microbiology is that was my major degree, and it was in clinical microbiology. So it was studying of microbes that are infectious, that cause disease, and soil microbiology. I know about it, but I don't know the microbes that exist in the soil to provide food. But in clinical microbiology and in chemistry, my minor, I developed, a BS degree and then had graduate course in clinical pathology. So part of that was microbiology, and I worked in a microbiology lab while I was going to school. So I'm well versed in understanding, how things work in the world of research and pathogenic identification. And so we have a COVID-19 virus. And back in the day, that was kind of, interestingly enough, back in the late 70s, kind of new in terms of being able to dig in. And electron microscope picture of the little organism was a big deal. And now it's like no big deal. But that's my background, and I worked in medical laboratory for over 30 years. I'm retired now, so it's been a while, but I do like to keep up on what's going on. And my brother-in-law, who's in immunogenetics background, did study in developing microbiology understanding and knowledge, which he's done. And there's an awful lot of people who are in the field who work day in and day out. And I, am acquainted with some of them. And so I kind of understand what it is they're doing and what's going on in the field because I've kept up on it.
And you grew up in a kind of a medical background. Your father was
Well, yeah, my father was a doctor. So I was well acquainted, let's put it that way, right, with medicine from day one.
Matthew, could you tell us what people may not understand about the Delta mutation and how that happened and what it involves?
Well, that's a big question. The Delta variant is a result of evolution. It's an evolutionary change. Every organism, that exists in the world is constantly evolving. There are changes happening to it, to its DNA, to its basic structure. This organism is no different. While it's a virus, and there are certain, subtle differences how it reproduces from, let's say, your cells, our cells. It nevertheless is a reproductive organism that in its reproduction goes through subtle and various changes in its DNA structure or RNA structure. So what happens is you get a selection, and the selection of that variant that survives the best in the environment that it is living in, that one will continue on, and the other ones will tend to die off or become less important, at least. So in this case, the Delta variant had gone through, millions or billions or trillions of reproductions and ended up being the strongest one that passed the easiest and was the most infectious. So with that, we now have the Delta variant being the primary COVID-19 organism that we're seeing. And because it's kind of sidesteps the immune response, that overwhelms it, it gets to establish itself and become once again a high producer of COVID-19 disease in the human population. So it required, passage in human from human to human for it to develop into such a strong pathogen. But it's there, it's here now, and there's even some breakthrough, but although it's very small, into those people who've been vaccinated. It's primarily reaching out and getting everyone who hasn't been vaccinated, which is why it's important, even for those of us who have been vaccinated, to wear masks if we're around people who have not been vaccinated, because we could pick it up and carry it. We may not even know that we've been exposed to it and carry it, because it does have some residual carriage in our nasopharyngeal passage for a day or two. They don't really know exactly. But because of that, we could, pick it up from somebody who has it and pass it to someone who doesn't, even though we're vaccinated. So we want to be careful about that and cautious about that. I know when we go out to crowded places, we put on a mask now, even though we've been vaccinated, because that's a possibility. And gosh, these young kids who can't get vaccinated yet, they're, and mostly they can withstand the disease, but not everybody can, and some have preconditions that will allow them to have a very bad outcome if they do get the disease. I don't know, is that responsive, Paul, to your question?
That's really, really very thorough, and it's very good. My question was going to be about, what if you've been vaccinated? Can you still get the disease or the variant? Can you carry it? Should you still be careful? And you've answered those questions. So what is different about this variant? What makes it more deadly? I guess it is, right? Or transmissible?
Well, it's really still the same basic organism, except for some of the subtle variations in its protein coat, which allow it to bypass immune system more readily. It's got a tougher presentation for our immune system and overwhelms it because it reproduces rapidly. I'm not aware that they actually have the actual molecular difference down. They probably do, but I haven't seen anything that published that yet. But it's really a matter of fooling the immune system and getting past it and overwhelming it. You have a certain basic immunity to any abnormal organism that enters your body to fight it off, and that system works quite well for an average everyday exposure. But as you all well know, in influenza, from year to year, we're subject to it and we get exposed to it and we can get sick. But if we've been vaccinated, even though the vaccine isn't specific for that particular influenza virus, it gives us some, general immunity so we don't get as sick. And that's a function of having an immune response. And without getting into the weeds too much, it gives you antibodies that, are generalized to a virus and to some specific viruses. So the specificity of the immune system antibodies, they won't be functional with a new virus. Well, that's true with this variant. So you've got a different structure. So this virus is put on a whole new set of clothing, let's say. And so you can't recognize it quite as well because it's different. May have shaved its beard off and maybe even, changed the color of its eyes. That kind of recognition is very difficult, as you well know. trying to identify somebody that you've seen once before and they've changed their look completely. You may not recognize them. So that's what happens with the immune system. If you get a variant that comes in that's been altered, it doesn't appear to be previous things. So you start to develop some immunity to it. But because it's the kind of virus that it is, and it reproduces so rapidly, it at first overwhelms your immune system. So then you get sick until your immune system can catch up and kill it off. And that takes time. But in the meantime, you get sick. Well, how sick do you get, and how invasive is this organism into the organs of your body? I mean, it gets into your liver, it gets into your kidneys, it gets into your muscles. Does it get into your brain? There seems to be some evidence that for some people that's even true. So you have that invasive ability because it sneaks in past your immune system. If you've been vaccinated, there's some general, sensitivity to it. It hasn't changed that much like an influenza does, but the SARS-CoV-2 virus has gone through some variations, many, many of them. And as the Delta one has shown up to be the most evasive in terms of, getting past your immune system. So, because of that, it can get in, it can get established, and it can make you very sick. Now, I know people who have been vaccinated and it did work around their immune system. They got sick for a couple of days, but generally they're okay. And some people I've known who have gotten it, even though vaccinated, and they didn't even know they had it. They went for a procedure in the hospital, and they, of course, test for COVID. Well, lo and behold, she was positive, and they did it again. Still positive. She was positive, but she had been vaccinated, but she had no symptoms whatsoever. So there's pretty good evidence out there that even though you've been vaccinated, you can pick it up again, you can carry it, and you can pass it on to other people. So, when you're out there in crowds nowadays, it's a good idea, given that this Delta variant's out there, to wear a mask when you're, in the crowd so you don't pick it up or you don't pass it. That's kind of the short version.
All right. Well, that's a great answer. Do you think that they are now working on a vaccine for this mutation?
Well, there are, yeah, they are. They are identifying, they've been in the process of identifying the changes in this. And as of yet, they don't feel like they need to do a booster for it because people are like 99.5% resistant to it if they have been vaccinated. So because there's such little breakthrough in terms of people who've been vaccinated to actually get the disease, they don't think it's necessary at this point to have a booster. Although, they are nevertheless working on developing a new, basically a new microRNA to pass on through a booster. But, it doesn't really seem to be likely that that's going to happen because we are, personally still, once we've been vaccinated, resistant to the virus, or at least there is no evidence that anyone's, been deathly ill once they've been vaccinated. So given that, it's not likely they're going to do a booster.
Well, people watching this might wonder, will there be another mutation? It's going to happen probably.
Yeah, it's happening as we speak. It's a little bit less visible in human terms because we reproduce so slowly. But whenever you do a reading or an investigation, if you're a scientist yourself, of organisms, you see mutations. And that's one of the things I think is unfortunate about education is that, we think we need to be educated so we can learn something, know something, but really a lot of education is to learn how much you don't know. And that really, for the most part, you just don't know. And in science, how many people have ever done a little science lab experiment? And the teacher wants you to have it work out. I feel it'd be better to have you do an experiment and not have it work out. See, people begin to realize just how difficult science is, and it's a matter of attempt and failure, and then every once in a while you get a success, and woo-ha, there you go. That's wonderful. And the same thing with our new vaccines. I mean, that was years and years and years in the development by researchers trying to figure out how to do this well. And they were able to do it. And therefore, we were able to rapidly come up with an effective vaccine from their years and years and years of research. But that doesn't get much, press or coverage because it's not sexy. It's not fancy. It's not, eye-catching. It's just day in, day out, hard, frustrating work. And I just, the scientists aren't getting the cred that they deserve for all the long hours that they spend and doing very frustrating work because, it's just not, well, okay, let's try this. Oh, boom, it worked out. Isn't that wonderful? No, that isn't the way it happens. It can take 20 years. I mean, even my brother-in-law won the Nobel Prize for one of his developments. It was just something that showed up on the way of his trying to get a cure for malaria, which, by the way, he never was able to do. But he did develop a process and procedure that other scientists were able to use successfully in developing other things. But that's kind of the way science goes. It's it's the unknown, and there's an awful lot of stumbling through to discover something. And evolution is very, very tricky. It's what life on this planet depends on, but it takes millions and millions of years for some sophisticated organism to show up. And even then, it doesn't stop evolving and changing all the time.
Well, I'm going to ask you an impossible question to answer. You can try your best. People probably generally don't understand all the science behind this situation. Wouldn't you agree? And so anti-vaxxers, I'm guessing, don't have a clue about what is happening. And why do you suppose they are resisting getting this vaccine, which could cause a lot of deaths? I mean, what I've seen and heard is about 99% of the people who are dying from COVID right now have not been vaccinated.
True.
So what is causing this anti-vax mentality? Try to answer that question for me.
That's a good question. I don't know, from being acquainted with people who are addicts, let's say, and addicts get a bad name. They really do, because human beings have a predilection for addiction. I mean, it's a habit forming. If you're someone who wants to be efficient, you develop habits. Well, addiction is kind of a habit that's gone astray. And I think that this is what happens, that you get an idea, you get a belief, and you're so sure, you just, this is it, I know this. And you go to a bar, you go to, the golf club, and you meet with a bunch of people, and, you talk about it, and you come up and, well, and in this discussion, in this, milieu, you come to a conclusion, and you think that it's just as valid as all those scientists, who, they're just taking money and finding what the people giving money want you to find. That kind of misunderstanding of what science is. I mean, science is not sitting around talking about it. It's not going on the computer and doing a meta-analysis, although some of it is that. But mostly what we're dealing with science is somebody doing the difficult work, the research of trying things out and failing and learning from the failure and trying again and learning from that failure and trying again and doing that day in, day out, and then having some successes that may actually help out for humanity. And that's what has happened is we have these wonderful viruses from all these scientists over the years developing it. I mean, my God, they developed a vaccine for polio. I mean, if anybody's, my age, they sure as heck remember polio and what it was like then and the iron lungs and so on. I mean, a vaccine for polio, if you didn't take that, and you got polio, it's a pretty good chance, you're going to have a life-altering disease, if not die from it. So, and now we have one, and I suppose people have sat around and they've discussed it, and they said, oh, well, so-and-so didn't have, or they had this disease, or we've thought about it, and, we think this, and they haven't really understood the difference between them having a discussion about it and what's actually happened in the scientific world. And it just, it's unfortunate because the media just hasn't done a good job of covering the real work that gets done in this world. Maybe engineers get it a little bit, they're scientists too, and they have to put together, designs that work. What about a car? Think about a car. What about all of the research that has gone into developing the modern vehicle that we drive down the road and take for granted? But, these people will go out and they'll get in their car and they'll drive down the road and they don't realize that they're driving a vehicle put together by science, by scientists. Any one of them that can put that together from scratch without knowing anything, without looking anything up, I want to see that. And they can't. But they don't want to see that. They don't want to admit to that. They want to really feel, significant and important. And I think it's unfortunate that we've come to the place where I think, personally anyway, that people have just not been honored for being just who they are. That's fine. If you don't, do any great scientific realizations, guess what? Most of the scientists at work don't either, but they contribute to an ultimate thing, just like each human being contributes, whatever you're doing. It's a contribution. We all need to understand that each other's contribution makes a difference. And I think if people knew that about themselves, that, whatever it is you can do, whatever it is you contribute, makes a difference. We spend way too much time criticizing those people who, get all the press. Well, they're not that great. I can do this. And it's like Rand Paul with Fauci. I mean, Fauci has got such a deeper understanding of what the science is than, Senator Rand Paul does. That's not his bailiwick. And yet he's hanging on to that, that he's a doctor. And well, it's not the same. And I think a lot of us get confused about that. And it's unfortunate because even the Republican leadership has realized that, we need to tell these people to get vaccinated because it really does make a difference. It makes a huge difference. And they're out there not getting vaccinated. They're committed to it. And I just think it's a complete misunderstanding of what human life is about and how we can work together and continue to take care of ourselves. I don't know. I don't have any magic bullets for how these people can, shake it loose and just go with it and take a chance, if you will. I don't know.
Well, they've been fed a steady diet of anti-science, and tribalism, and politics has taken over and reared its ugly head, and people just believe what they want to believe. And that's where we are right now. I mean, there's a segment of the population who will never, ever get a vaccination, probably 20%, 15, 20%, no matter what you
Yeah,
say, because
yeah.
they're going to, who knows, but it's misinformation, disinformation. Unfortunately, we're going to suffer. But if people would take some time and do what you've done, and study and look at what the reality is, the polio vaccine probably took what, years, didn't it? 10, 15 years
Oh,
to
God, at
create.
least, yeah.
Smallpox, measles vaccine, I doubt it was very quickly done. And here we are within a short period of time. It's kind of a miracle, isn't it, that this
Yeah,
vaccine was developed so
that
quickly.
was fabulous. The microRNA concept, breakthrough, that was just fabulous.
Oh yeah. And here it is. We have it. And it's like water in the desert, and we need to drink it. And I don't know what else to say. There's nothing you can really say to anybody who's going to resist. So,
You know, what's fascinating, Paul, is the history of vaccines
mhm.
and how far back it goes, because they have been doing this kind of thing back into the Grecian times. I mean, probably before that, that they have been, recognizing that, well, if I take one of these pustules and break it and scratch it on somebody else's skin, you know, I can give them immunity to smallpox. Yeah, I mean, it's really, before they knew it was a virus, before they knew there were bacteria, the doctors of the day, and they were doctors, so really they were, curing people, and they had failures, but they worked at it and tried to understand how to get it done. And they tried these things out, and vaccines were one of the things that they tried out, and it worked sometimes. But now we understand much better than then, and we know exactly, what the functioning is of our immune system, and how to support it, and staying healthy.
Well, I got to tell you, you've really given some good answers, some good information. I wish everybody knew more about this whole situation, but you've helped, and I'm going to put it out there and try to get some people to watch it. We'll see what happens. Okay.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you.
Any final thoughts?
No, just protect your kids. Get them vaccinated as soon as they allow for it. Um, I wish they were, going to let them get vaccinated now, but fortunately, they're, for the most part, they do better
Mhm.
with the disease, and I hope that continues. But stay safe, wear a mask, um, take care of your kids.
All right. Well, thank you, Matthew. Really good job. Enjoyed it.
Oh, thank you.